Hello, we are going to be working on lesson 12.2 today. Sorry, I'm trying to get my mind in the right space here. So if you have not already completed the 12.2 Spark about the horses and their field, if you'll go ahead and try that and then come back when you are ready to see how I thought about this problem. So it tells us here that a farmer has a rectangular paddock for his horses as shown. So it's 8.5 feet by 33 feet. He wants to reconfigure. So he wants to rearrange his fields and change the paddock so that it is a square. So he wants to turn this rectangle into a square. However, he wants to use the same fence, or he wants to have it have the same area. So he doesn't want his horses to have a smaller area or bigger area. He wants that area to stay exactly as it was. What would the side of the square paddock be? So the first thing I need to do is find out the area of this paddock, the rectangular one, because we want to keep that the same. So we've got 8 and 1/4, and we're going to multiply that by 33. So I'm going to change this into a mixed, an improper fraction. So it's already mixed. I'm going to change it improper. 4 times 8 is 32. 33 over 4 times 33 over 1. So I need to do 33 times 33 is, there's 9, placeholder 9, 9. So this is telling me, oh, I guess I need to do this. This is an 18 and 10. So his field is 1,089 feet. We need to divide that by 4. So we're going to do 1089 divided by 4. So it goes in here 2 times and 2 left over. It goes into 8 7 times exactly. And then here's 9. 4 goes into 9 2 times, which is 8, and 1/4 left over. So the total area is 272 and 1/4 feet squared. So when we turn this into a square, we want it to be exactly the same. So think about, what do you know about a square? What do we know about a square? Well, we know every side needs to be the same here. So when I do this side times this side, they should be the same. What is this going to be? And how can I get to 272? So I know if each side was 10, and if I did 10 times 10, that's only 100. So I know that's not big enough. So let's try doubling that. Let's try 20. If every side is 20 and I did 20 times 20, whoops, that should be 10 times 10 equals 100. 20 times 20 is 400. And we're looking for 272. So that's a little bit too big. So it's definitely closer to 20. So I'm going to try 15. So go ahead and do 15 times 15. So 15 times 15 is 225. So that's a little bit too small, but I'm getting closer. So let's try 16. So 16 times 16 is 256, getting closer. Okay, let's try if every side is 17. 17 times 17 is 289. So that's really close. So it's somewhere in between here. So let's try 16 and a half times 16 and a half and see where that gets us. So 16.5 times 16.5. Oh, perfect is 272.25. So sometimes with problems, there is some guessing and checking to see what would make sense. I knew 10 was too small. I knew 20 was too big. So we're not just randomly guessing. We want to use our mathematical common sense to see. So we narrowed it down. It's got to be between here. So now I picked halfway between there. Okay, it's got to be a little bit bigger. And we found our answer. So every side is 16. If he makes a square, it has the same area. Every side is 16.5 feet. So today we are going to be working on finding the area of a triangle, given the base or the height. So to find the area of a triangle, of any triangle, is our goal today. That's a 3. That is grade level. So it can be a right triangle, obtuse, acute, any triangle. We can find the area using the formula. If you can find the area of just a right triangle, so it has that right 90-degree angle, and they're straight up and down, then that is a 2. And if you can understand and remember the area for a triangle, that's a 1. So a 4 today is that you can find the area of any triangle, and if it gives you the area, you can work backwards and tell me the base or the height. So you can find the area, and if it gives you the area, you can work backwards and tell me the dimensions of that triangle. So 3 is just find the area. That's our goal. 4, above and beyond, means that you can also work backwards. So before we get going, I want you to think, what do you know about the area of this rectangle? Will you see if you can find the area of the rectangle? So 6 times 3, length times width, is 18 centimeters squared. So we could fit 18 squares inside that rectangle. So go ahead and draw that rectangle, 6 by 3. And now split the rectangle from corner to corner and make it 2 diagonals, so 2 triangles. So we took this same rectangle, it's still 6 by 3. And what did we do to it? We cut it into 2 pieces. So what do you think the area of each triangle would be? So our total rectangle was 18 centimeters squared. So what do you think this would be and this? Do you think they're the same? Do you think they're different? What do you think those are? So we'll come back to that in just a second. So how are 2 triangles related to the rectangle? So if I'm looking here, this rectangle is the same as these 2 triangles. They're exactly the same. So a rectangle is really just 2 triangles. We cut, or we can say that backwards. To get a rectangle, we can cut it in half and make 2 triangles. So 2 of the same triangles make a rectangle. So this rectangle is the same, or this triangle, right? It's just flipped, and that can fit on there. These are the same. 2 of the same triangles make a rectangle. Sorry, I can't get that back to the rectangle shape. So come back here. What do you think the area is? These are exactly the same. We took 18 and we cut it into 2 pieces. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. So this triangle has an area of 9. This triangle has an area of 9. And so they're centimeters squared. So 9 centimeters squared, 9 plus 9 is a total of 18. So let's compare the words we use when talking about a rectangle and a triangle. So here we have, this is our length, this is our width. So remember when we did parallelograms, we turned it into the base. That's what it sits on. And then the height has to come straight up and down from a right angle. So this is our base. And then our height comes straight up and down And then this is on a triangle, it's called a hypotenuse. So you won't have to be able to find the hypotenuse. That will come later in math. But we just need to know the name of that diagonal there. So this is our diagonal. We need to know it if we are finding the perimeter. But for area, we just need to know the base and the height. And remember, height always comes from a right angle. So when we're finding the area of a right triangle, we are looking at half of the rectangle. So, right, this triangle is half of this rectangle. So we're just going to pretend like we are finding a rectangle. So we're going to find the whole rectangle. And then we're going to, so we found the whole rectangle, length times width or base times height. And then we just cut it in half. And that tells us our answer here. So what do you think the formula might be? So take a second and write down, what do you think the formula for the area of a triangle is? So the official formula is half of the base times the height. We'll take a look at that. And I like to think of it a different way, and it means the same thing. So here's another way we can write this. So this problem, our base is 6, our height is 3. We're going to multiply first. 6 times 3 is 18. And then we want half of that. Half of means multiply. Half of 18, 18 over 2 is 9. Half of 18 is 9. I like to think of it as base times height. And instead of multiplying by a half, I just like to divide by 2. So 6 times 3 is 18. Divided by 2 is 9. Either way, we came up with the same answer. So you can either times by a half or divide by 2 will give you that same answer. So let's look at task number 1. So it tells us that this diagonal line connects the two opposite corners. So we're going to find the area of this right triangle. So the base is what it sits on here. And remember, the height always comes from the 90-degree angle. So let's take a look. What is the relationship between the rectangle and the two triangles? We talked about this before. What's the relationship between this rectangle and the two triangles? Well, the triangles are half of the rectangle, or the rectangle is 2 times bigger than one of the triangles. So our rectangle formula is base times height. And if we're doing the triangle, we take base times height, but we just want half of it, or we can divide it. Sorry, that's an H there, or we can divide it by 2. So let's have a look here. So here's our base is 16. So B is 16. H is 4 because it comes straight up from that right angle. So we want half of 16 times by 4. So what is half of 16? Half of 16, whoops, sorry, it already put the 4 over here. Half of 16 is 8. And then we're going to do 8 times 4 to get that final answer. So 8 times 4, because half of 16 times by 4 will give us this answer. Or you can always just do 16 times 4 and then divide that by 2 will give you that same answer. So go ahead and complete task 1 and come back when you are ready for task 2. So now we're going to look at non-right triangles. So before that height, it already was there. It went straight up and down for us. So now we're going to look at different types of triangles. So remember, parallelograms are rectangles that are slanted. They have 4 sides. We use that same formula, base times height. So we can use the same formula here, but we've got to remember height goes straight up and down. So the formula for a parallelogram is base times height. How do you think that's going to relate to our triangle? So look, when I go corner to corner, we cut it in half. So we want half of the base times the height. Base times height, cut it in half or divide by 2. So the formula for our triangle here, base times height, and we want to divide it by 2. So base times height can also be written BH, and we want to divide BH by 2. Another way we can write that is to do base times height, and then we would times it by 1/2, cut it in half, cut it in half. Either way, we're cutting the rectangle in half. You end up with a triangle. Okay, so let's try this one here. So our base here is 10. So base is 10. So we want half the base times the height. So sometimes these are kind of confusing to look at here. So I just like to write my own. So I want half of the base is 10 times, here's our height, straight up and down. If there happened to be a number over here, like a 7, we don't need that to find the inside. The height goes straight up and down is 6. So half of 10 times 6 is what? So 6 times 10. So we're going to do 6 times 10. Then we're going to divide that by 2. Will tell us the square inches of this triangle. So go ahead and complete task 2 and come back when you're ready to do task 3. Hey, the height of a triangle is perpendicular. So this is an obtuse triangle. So this angle here is greater than 90 degrees. So sometimes it might show us the height outside. So to get from here straight up, right? It's that same height from here to here. So just extending that line here to here is what? So let me get rid of all my marker here so I can see my problem. So sometimes our height is outside, but remember, it always comes from a right angle. So identify your right angle. So this time it gave us the area. And we know area of a triangle is half of the base times the height. So let's plug in what we know. We know that A is 15. Here's our height is 5. So we know the half. We don't know the base though. That's what we're looking for. And we have 5. So times by 5. So let's see which of these might be able to tell us this problem here. So here they have the area times, they said the area was the base. They did the base times the area. We want base times height. That's not going to work because we would need to work backwards. So the opposite of, right? So we want to go backwards here. So let's see, base times 15. No, we want to do base times 5. So that's not it. Okay, base times 5. So that sounds good. Base times 5, and then they squared it. We don't want to square it. We want to cut it in half, not squaring. So let's try this one. Base times 5, base times 5. So we times by a half, which is cutting it in half. They divided it by 2, same thing, equals 15. So this one here is the only one that makes sense. So now we want to solve for B. We need to get B all by itself. So let's use this problem here. So we have 15 equals B times 5 over 2. We need to get B by itself. We're going to work backwards. So the last thing we did was divide by 2. So do the opposite and times by 2. Times by 2 on this side cancels it out. Times by 2 over here, 15 times 2 is 30. So now we're left with b times 5 equals 30. What's the opposite of divide by 5? This is times by 5. Now we want to divide by 5 on both sides will give us b. If I plug that back in, 30 divided by 5 is 6, so b equals 6. Let's plug it back in. 6 times 5 is 30. Cut it in half is 15. So when it gives you the area, you've got to times by 2. Since we cut it in half, we're working backwards, and then do the opposite. And then the opposite of timesing is to divide. So when we're working backwards, everything goes opposite. Instead of dividing by 2, we times by 2. Instead of timesing by the height, we divide by the height. Everything goes backwards. Okay, so go ahead and complete task 3. Come back when you are ready to do task 4. So task 4 tells us that we have this city planned in a grid, and often there are diagonal streets that go across and form right triangles. We're going to find the area of the triangle in square feet. So what are the dimensions shown? Assume that the horizontal side straight across is the base. So here's our base. Here's our height. The base is 1,400. The height is 700. So our equation would look like 1,400 times 700 divided by 2 equals the area. Or we could, instead of dividing by 2, we could times it by a half. So you're going to go ahead and solve that. So 14,000 times 700 divided by 2 will give us that area. So go ahead and complete task 4 and then come back when you are ready to do. I just have a few more problems I want to practice before you do your check for understanding. So come back when you are ready. Okay, so we want to do base times height divided by 2. So find the base. What does it sit on? The base is 12. Find the height. Height goes straight up. Where's the height? Height is straight up is 8. So 12 times 8 is 96. And then we're going to cut that in half. Goes in here 4 times. 1 left over is 8. So our answer is 48. So we have 48 centimeters squared. Even though this is a triangle, we are still finding how many squares fit inside of here. Okay, let's try this one. So base times height divided by 2. Our base is what it sits on. So the base is 7. And the right angle comes from the base. So even if this whole problem was tipped sideways, the right angle comes from the base. So here's our base because here's our right angle. So here's our base is 7. The height is from the right angle, 10. So 7 times 10 is 70. But that found a rectangle. That found 7 times 10 as a rectangle. So we need to cut it in half. That goes in there 3 times and 5 times. So our answer is 35 centimeters squared. Okay, let's try this one here. So base is 5. Height is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. Cut it in half is 20 centimeters squared. Okay, this one is just tipped sideways. Here's our right angle. So we're using the things that go from the right angles. So 7 times 4 divided by 2. 7 times 4 is 28. Divided by 2 is 14 centimeters squared. Okay, this time we are going to work backwards. Okay, so let's work backwards on these. So these are the level 4. So if you can do this and work backwards, that's a 4. Just solving them is a 3. So let's take a look at this one here. So base times height is our base times height equals area. So area is 48. The base we don't know. The height is 4. We want to get b alone. What's the opposite of times by 4? We need to divide by 4. 48 divided by 4 is 12. 12 times 4 is 48. So we're just working backwards here. So let's try this one here. So our area is 56. To find the area is the base. We don't know the base. Times the height is 7. Opposite of times 7 is divide by 7 on both sides. 56 divided by 7 is 8 equals B. Plug it back in. 7 times 8, base times height, is 56. So let's try this triangle over here. So we know our formula is area equals base times height divided by 2. So work back. Let's plug in what we know. Area is 20. Base is 8. We don't know the height though, so 8h divided by 2. So the opposite of divide by 2 is 2 times by 2. So now we have 40 equals 8h. So we want to get h alone, so divide by 8, divide by 8, 5 equals h. So let's plug it in. 5 times h is 40. That's a rectangle. You have to cut it in half. 40 divided by 2 is 20. So if you understand this, that's a 4 today. If you understand how to find a triangle when it's a right angle, base times height, cut it in half. That's a 3. If you can do any of these shapes, even if they're turned sideways, or you can identify the base and the height and cut it in half, then that is a 3. So go ahead and finish up your tasks and do your check for understanding. And then we'll do our homework tomorrow. And if you need any other help, let me know.